Life has a way of testing us right before something extraordinary happens. It's almost as if the universe, under God's direction, orchestrates a series of challenges to see if we are truly ready to receive what we've been praying for. Think about it. Have you ever noticed how things seem to get harder just before a major breakthrough? You might find yourself struggling more, facing unexpected obstacles, or feeling like nothing is working in your favor. It's frustrating, confusing, and at times it can feel like God is silent. But what if I told you that this is not a sign of failure? What if this is actually proof that something big is on its way before God gives you something significant? He often allows a period of struggle, discomfort, and resistance. Why? Because growth happens in discomfort. Just like a caterpillar must struggle in its cocoon before it transforms into a butterfly, we must also go through moments of pressure and challenge before stepping into our blessings. The struggle isn't meant to break us, it's meant to prepare us. When life becomes difficult, it's easy to believe that you're moving in the wrong direction. You start questioning everything. Why is this happening to me? Why is everything falling apart? But what if instead of falling apart, things are actually falling into place? Imagine an athlete training for a major competition. Before they win the race, they endure intense training, exhaustion, and even moments of doubt. Their body aches, their mind plays tricks on them, and at times they feel like giving up. But what they don't realize in the moment is that every drop of sweat, every ounce of effort, and every painful setback is part of the process that strengthens them for the victory ahead. It's the same in our spiritual lives. When God is about to bless you, He doesn't just hand it to you without preparation. He first takes you through a season where you must prove that you are ready for the responsibility that comes with that blessing. Think about biblical figures like Joseph. Before he became second in command in Egypt, he was betrayed by his own brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, and thrown into prison. Every step of his journey seemed to take him further from his dream, yet, in reality, each hardship was shaping him into the man who would one day save an entire nation. If Joseph had not gone through the pain, he wouldn't have developed the wisdom, humility, and strength required for his destiny. His challenges were not signs of God's abandonment. They were signs that God was preparing him for something greater. It's the same with us. We pray for success, for love, for financial breakthroughs, for opportunities, but do we recognize the signs of preparation? When life gets tough, instead of seeing it as a punishment, what if we saw it as an indication that we are on the verge of something extraordinary? The problem is that most people give up too soon. They quit right before their breakthrough. They walk away from the race before reaching the finish line because they assume that difficulty means denial. But difficulty is not denial, it's development. When things seem to be going wrong, it's easy to become discouraged. You might start comparing yourself to others, wondering why their lives seem to be moving forward while you feel stuck. But let me tell you this, sometimes the people who seem to be moving the fastest are not necessarily the ones who will last the longest. A house built quickly without a strong foundation will eventually collapse. But a house that takes time, one where every brick is carefully placed, will stand strong for years to come. The same applies to your life. God is not just interested in giving you blessings, He is interested in making sure you are equipped to handle them. If you are feeling pressure right now, if you are facing resistance, if doors are closing instead of opening, don't lose hope. Resistance is proof that you are growing. The enemy doesn't attack people who aren't a threat. If you're facing opposition, it's because you are on the path to something greater. When a plane takes off, the pilot doesn't turn around just because of turbulence. The turbulence is a natural part of reaching higher altitudes. The same applies to you. The challenges you face are not signs to turn back. They are signs that you are ascending to a new level. Most people want blessings without struggle, success without sacrifice, growth without challenges. But that's not how life works. Every great leader, every successful person, every individual who has ever accomplished something meaningful has a story of struggle behind their success. They had moments where they wanted to quit, where they felt lost, where nothing seemed to make sense, but they kept going. They understood that before something great happens, there is always a season of testing. Look at your own life. Think about the times you faced setbacks, heartbreaks, or failures. At the moment it felt unbearable, but now, looking back, you can see that those moments shaped you. They made you stronger, wiser, more resilient. And if you're in a season of struggle right now, I want you to shift your perspective. What if this hardship is not the end, but the beginning of something bigger? What if, instead of breaking you, this is building you? What if what feels like a breakdown is actually a breakthrough in disguise? The truth is, the bigger the blessing, the bigger the preparation. When God is about to elevate you, He first strengthens your character. He teaches you patience, resilience, and trust. He removes the distractions and people that are not meant to go with you to the next level. He stretches you beyond your comfort zone because He knows that if He gave you everything you asked for too soon, you wouldn't be ready for it. God's plan is always bigger than our own. We may not understand why we have to go through difficulties, but later we will see that every challenge was necessary. So instead of resisting the process, embrace it. Instead of seeing obstacles as setbacks, see them as setups for something greater. Because when God is about to give you something big, the first sign is not ease, it's challenge. But that challenge is not meant to stop you, it's meant to shape you. Faith is one of the most powerful forces that exist, yet it is often the hardest thing to hold on to when things don't go the way we expect. We live in a world that thrives on instant gratification, where we want results now, where we expect immediate answers, and where waiting feels like an unnecessary delay. But God does not operate on our timeline. His ways are higher, His timing is perfect, and His plans for us are far greater than we can comprehend. The problem is that most people give up before they see the manifestation of what they have been praying for. They lose faith when things don't happen fast enough. They grow impatient when doors don't open on their schedule. They assume that silence means rejection, that delay means denial. But what if I told you that waiting is not a sign that nothing is happening? What if I told you that in the waiting, something powerful is being developed inside of you? The truth is, before any great blessing, there is always a waiting period. It is in this season that our faith is tested, our patience is refined, and our trust in God is strengthened. The waiting period is not a punishment. It is a process of preparation. Think about a farmer who plants a seed. He does not dig it up every day to see if it has grown. He does not get frustrated when he doesn't see immediate results. Instead, he trusts that in the unseen, the seed is taking root, that growth is happening even when he cannot perceive it. Faith works the same way. Just because you don't see it yet does not mean that God is not working. Just because things seem still on the surface does not mean that transformation is not happening beneath. Patience is not just about waiting, it's about how you wait. It's easy to trust God when everything is going well, when prayers are answered quickly, when life moves smoothly. But true faith is tested in the waiting. True faith is when you stand firm even when nothing makes sense. It is when you continue believing even when the situation looks impossible. It is when you keep trusting even when there is no evidence that things are changing. Because the reality is, God is never in a hurry, but He is always on time. What looks like a delay to us is actually divine timing in action. What seems like silence is often God working behind the scenes, aligning circumstances, preparing opportunities, and shaping us into the person who is ready to receive what we have been asking for. Think about the story of Abraham. God promised him that he would be the father of many nations, yet for years he and his wife Sarah remained childless. It would have been easy for him to give up, to assume that God had forgotten His promise, to let doubt take over. But Abraham chose to believe, even when it didn't make sense. He waited, and in the right time, God's time, the promise was fulfilled. His story teaches us that faith is not about what we see, it is about what we believe. It is about trusting that even in the unseen, God is moving, orchestrating, and setting things in motion. Waiting seasons are uncomfortable. They challenge us, stretch us, and push us beyond our limits. But they also build endurance, patience, and unwavering trust. Many times we think we are ready for the blessing, but God sees what we cannot. He knows when we are truly prepared, when our hearts are in the right place, when our character is strong enough to handle what is coming. If God gave us everything we wanted the moment we asked for it, we would never learn to trust Him. We would never develop the faith required to sustain the blessing. Because receiving is one thing, but maintaining is another. It is easy to be grateful when we finally get what we prayed for, but if we did not learn patience, if we did not develop faith, we might not appreciate it the way we should. Look at the life of Joseph. He had a dream that one day he would be in a position of power, yet instead of stepping straight into his destiny, he was sold into slavery, falsely accused, thrown into prison, and left to wait for years. At any moment, he could have lost hope, could have questioned God's promise, could have chosen to stop believing, but he didn't. He remained faithful, even in the prison, even in the struggle. And in the right moment, God elevated him, placing him in a position that not only fulfilled his dream, but also saved the lives of many. His story is proof that patience and faith are rewarded, that even when things seem unfair, even when nothing seems to be happening, God is always working. It is natural to feel frustrated in the waiting. It is human to want to see results quickly. But impatience leads to poor decisions, to settling for less than what God has for you, to rushing into things that are not meant for you. Think about how many people give up too soon. How many settle for relationships that are not right because they grew tired of waiting for the right one? How many quit on their dreams because they did not see progress fast enough? How many walk away from their calling because the journey took longer than expected? But what if the breakthrough was just around the corner? What if the blessing was on its way, but they gave up before they could receive it? There is something powerful about trusting God's timing. It takes surrender. It takes a willingness to let go of control and say, God, I trust that you know what's best. I trust that even when I don't see it, you are working. I trust that your plans for me are greater than anything I could create for myself. When you operate from this mindset, you stop forcing things to happen. You stop trying to manipulate circumstances. You stop worrying about when and how things will come together. Instead, you rest in the assurance that everything is unfolding exactly as it should. God's promises are never void. If He said He would do it, He will do it. But He will do it in the right time, the perfect time, the time when you are fully ready to receive and sustain the blessing. The waiting period is not a waste. It is a season of preparation, a time of refinement, a moment where faith is strengthened. And the ones who hold on, who trust, who believe, even when nothing makes sense, those are the ones who will see the fulfillment of what they have been waiting for. Letting go is one of the hardest things for people to do. Human nature clings to what is familiar, what is comfortable, and what feels safe. But when God is about to give you something bigger, He often requires you to release what no longer serves you. The challenge is that most people don't recognize when it's time to let go. They hold on to relationships that have run their course. They cling to jobs that no longer fulfill them. They remain in environments that hinder their growth, all because they are afraid of the unknown. They fear what will happen if they release what they have known for so long, not realizing that what they are holding on to is actually preventing them from stepping into something greater. God does not take things away to punish you. He removes them to make room for something better. But the problem is that most people resist change. They pray for more, yet when God starts shifting things in their life, they panic. They don't see the bigger picture. They don't understand that the very thing they are losing is the thing that was keeping them from receiving what they have been asking for. When a door closes, it is not always the enemy working against you. Sometimes it is God protecting you. Sometimes it is Him redirecting you to something that aligns with your purpose. But if you are too attached to what is familiar, you will never move forward. Think about the Israelites when they were freed from Egypt. They had been delivered from bondage, yet as soon as they faced difficulties in the wilderness, they longed to go back. They were so accustomed to the life of slavery that they could not fully embrace the freedom God was leading them into. That is how many people live their lives. They try to hold on to what is familiar, even when it no longer serves them. But you cannot receive the new if you are unwilling to release the old. Letting go requires trust. It requires believing that God's plan is greater than your own. It requires faith in the unseen, faith that even when something is taken away, it is for your good. But this is where many struggle. They ask God for blessings, yet they refuse to release the things that are blocking those blessings. They want a new season, yet they resist the changes that come with it. They pray for opportunities, but refuse to step out of their comfort zones. You cannot have both. You cannot hold on to the past and expect to step into the future at the same time. Look at Abraham. When God called him to leave his homeland and go to a place he had never been before, he had a choice. He could stay where he was in the land he knew, or he could step into the unknown and trust that God was leading him to something better. He chose to trust. He chose to let go of familiarity in order to embrace his destiny. And because of that choice, he became the father of many nations. Imagine if he had refused. Imagine if he had stayed where he was simply because he was afraid of stepping into something new. He would have missed the fulfillment of God's promise. Many times we miss what God has for us because we are too afraid to let go. We fear the uncertainty of what lies ahead. We want guarantees. We want to know exactly how things will unfold. But faith does not work that way. Faith is walking forward even when you don't have all the answers. Faith is releasing what is in your hands even when you don't know what will replace it. Faith is trusting that God will provide, even when you don't see how. Think about the people you have outgrown. There are some relationships that were only meant to be in your life for a season, but when you try to hold on to what was only meant to be temporary, you delay your own growth. Not everyone can go where God is taking you. Not everyone is meant to be in your next chapter. And if you try to bring people into a season that they were never meant to be part of, you will only create unnecessary struggles for yourself. There are friendships that end not because something went wrong, but because you have outgrown each other. There are jobs that no longer fulfill you, not because you failed, but because you have reached the end of that assignment. But if you are unwilling to let go, you will stay stuck in places that no longer serve your purpose. God is always moving us forward. He is always calling us to greater things. But if you refuse to release what is no longer aligned with your destiny, you will never step into what is next. Look at how a snake sheds its skin. If it does not release the old layer, it will not be able to grow. The same principle applies to us. There are seasons where we must shed the past in order to embrace what is ahead. But many people resist this process. They fight to hold on to what they have outgrown. They fear what will happen if they release what is familiar. And in doing so, they delay their own progress. There are things in your life right now that God is asking you to let go of. Maybe it's a toxic relationship. Maybe it's a mindset that is keeping you stuck. Maybe it's a job that no longer fulfills you. Maybe it's a habit that is preventing you from stepping into your purpose. Whatever it is, you have to trust that if God is leading you away from it, it is for your good. Holding on to something that is no longer meant for you will only create frustration. You will feel stuck. You will feel drained. You will feel like you are constantly trying to force something that no longer fits. And the longer you resist, the harder the transition will be. Letting go is not always easy. It requires faith. It requires surrender. But when you finally release what is no longer serving you, you will find that God has something far greater in store. You will see that what you thought was a loss was actually making room for a gain. You will understand that what felt like rejection was actually redirection. You will realize that everything you let go of was necessary for you to step into your next level. And only then will you be truly ready to receive what God has been preparing for you all along. Elevation always comes with opposition. The moment you step into a new season, the moment you start moving towards something greater, the moment you begin to grow, resistance will appear. It comes in many forms. Sometimes it looks like obstacles, roadblocks, delays, and unforeseen setbacks. It can even come from within as self-doubt, fear, and insecurity start to rise up just when you are on the verge of something greater. This is not a coincidence. The enemy does not fight people who are not a threat. If you are facing resistance, it is because you are stepping into something significant. Most people mistake opposition as a sign that they are on the wrong path. They assume that if something is difficult, if doors are not opening easily, if challenges keep appearing, then maybe it's a sign to stop. But that is not how faith works. If everything in life was easy, there would be no need for growth, no need for trust, no need for endurance. But God allows opposition not to stop us, but to strengthen us. He allows resistance because it builds character. It develops perseverance. It forces us to rely on Him instead of our own strength. Think about a weightlifter. The only way to build muscle is by lifting heavier and heavier weights. Without resistance, there is no growth. The same applies to our spiritual and personal development. Every time we face difficulty, every time we encounter a challenge, it is an opportunity to become stronger, wiser, and more resilient. But most people avoid resistance. They run from anything that feels uncomfortable. They shrink back when things don't go as planned. They retreat when they face criticism or rejection. And in doing so, they forfeit the blessings that were waiting on the other side of perseverance. Look at the life of David. Before he became king, he faced incredible opposition. He was overlooked, underestimated, and ridiculed. When he stepped forward to fight Goliath, people doubted him. They told him he was too young, too weak, too inexperienced. But David did not let opposition stop him. He understood that resistance was part of the process. He faced Goliath with faith, and that battle propelled him into his destiny. But what if he had listened to the voices of doubt? What if he had let fear stop him? He would have never stepped into his calling. The same applies to you. Every time you move towards something greater, opposition will come. When you start a new business, there will be obstacles. When you pursue a dream, there will be naysayers. When you grow in your faith, there will be distractions and attacks. But opposition is not a sign to turn back. It is a sign that you are on the right path. The enemy does not waste time attacking people who are not going anywhere. If you are facing resistance, it means you are making progress. One of the biggest tactics of opposition is discouragement. When things don't happen as fast as we want, when we face repeated setbacks, when we encounter unexpected difficulties, discouragement tries to creep in. It whispers lies. Maybe this isn't for you. Maybe you're not good enough. Maybe you should just give up. And too many people listen to that voice. They let discouragement convince them to quit right before the breakthrough. But if they had just pushed a little further, if they had held on a little longer, they would have seen the fulfillment of what they had been working for. Think about how many people miss their destiny because they allow resistance to stop them. They quit on their dreams because they faced one too many obstacles. They walked away from their calling because the path wasn't easy. But nothing worthwhile comes without a fight. Every person who has ever accomplished something significant had to push through challenges. They had moments where they wanted to give up. But they didn't. They kept going despite the resistance. And because they endured, they reached the other side. Joseph faced betrayal, slavery, false accusations, and years in prison before he stepped into his purpose. Moses faced opposition from Pharaoh, from his own people, and even from himself as he doubted his ability to lead. Esther had to risk everything to step into her calling. Nehemiah faced threats and resistance while rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem. Over and over again, the pattern is the same. Before elevation, there is opposition. When you understand this, you stop seeing resistance as a reason to quit. Instead, you see it as confirmation that you are moving in the right direction. You stop being surprised when difficulties arise. You stop letting criticism shake your confidence. You stop letting delays make you question your path. Instead, you recognize that every challenge is refining you, preparing you, and positioning you for something greater. Some of the opposition you face will come from people. Not everyone will celebrate your growth. Some will doubt you. Some will try to talk you out of what God has called you to do. Some will be jealous, threatened, or simply unable to understand the vision God has given you. But you cannot let their opinions determine your path. If David had listened to his brothers, if Joseph had given in to bitterness after being betrayed, if Nehemiah had stopped building because of his critics, their destinies would have never been fulfilled. You have to develop resilience. You have to train your mind to see resistance as a stepping stone rather than a roadblock. You have to stand firm in the face of opposition and declare, I will not be moved, because the truth is, the greater the calling, the greater the opposition, the bigger the blessing, the bigger the battle. And if you are facing a high level of resistance right now, it is because God is preparing to take you to a high level of purpose. Too many people retreat at the first sign of struggle. They let fear dictate their decisions. They let difficulties make them question what they know they are called to do. But resistance is not an indicator of failure. It is an indicator of progress. It is proof that you are on the verge of something greater. And when you refuse to back down, when you press forward despite the challenges, when you keep going even when everything in you wants to quit, that is when breakthrough happens. That is when the promise is fulfilled. That is when everything God has prepared for you begins to unfold.